Free Comic Day. Sorry that, there you go. So anyway, welcome to our Free Comic Day virtual, or Free Comic Day light, as Allison likes to call it. When it was announced that we were not going to have Free Comic Day, it broke my heart, and I whined and pouted for a couple weeks, and then I decided, let's do it this way. So thank you for being a part of our experiment.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So if we could start with you just telling us who you are and a little bit about what you're working on or things like that, if you don't mind.
Sure. My name's Christopher Sebela. I'm a comic book writer. Let's see. I've written a lot of creator-owned books like High Crimes, Welcome Back, Dead Letters, Heartthrob. Most recently, it's been Shanghai Red from Image and Crowded from Image. And then I've written like for DC and Marvel, and I did an Escape from New York book. I put out some self-published stuff, like when I lived in a Clown Motel for a month, and you can hear my voice break on that just because talking about it still fills me with dread. Yeah.
How soon until we could get to that? But if you don't want to talk, that's fine.
No, I'm fine. It's just been a while. It's been a while since I talked to anybody, really. So.
Well, do you want to, before we get into the comic stuff, tell us about the Clown Motel?
Yeah, it's a place I lived for 30 days. It's out in the middle of, it's in Tonopah, Nevada, which is like 3 hours in either direction from Vegas or Reno. And it's a clown-themed motel that I got weirdly obsessed with for a little bit back in 2015. And then basically I wanted to do a writing retreat where I just went somewhere with no distractions and like just wrote for a month, but I didn't want to pay for it. So I kickstarted it, and I raised all the money in like 4 hours, and then I was forced to go. I was legally obligated. So yeah, I lived there for 30 days, and it was terrible. And there were good moments. Like I'm super glad I did it, but you know, the actual living through it sucked a lot. And I don't recommend it. But you can't even do it anymore because like they've I don't know, somebody new bought the Clown Motel, and they've sort of they're sort of leaning into the clown horror thing a bit too much for my taste personally. Like I liked it when they had no idea why people thought they were creepy, and now they totally get why people think they're creepy, and they're just like, we'll just do more of that. So I'm saying the Clown Motel. Yeah, I'm saying the Clown Motel is sold out. Like it used to be cool 5 years ago, but now it's not cool anymore. So
see, that's not the version of the story that I had heard. I had heard that you loved it and it was a super great experience, and I don't remember who told me about it.
Yeah, they were lying to you. Like it was for the most part enjoyable, but you know, you spend 30 days in any motel room and you're gonna start to hate everything, especially in a town where you can't do anything. Like they didn't their form of entertainment was drinking or meth, so neither of which I'm super into. So yeah, so then suddenly you're just like, oh, I'm just here in the middle of nowhere. I don't know anybody. I got nothing to do except however I occupy my time. And that's the thing, is like, as a writer, like I've had dreams of like, oh, if I could just go somewhere for like a month, like I'd get so much done. And then I went there and I was like, this is horrible. I don't want to work. It's like how I feel now, basically. It's like, it is so hard to work. Like, I'm just full of, back then it was like, I'm so full of regret and just counting down the hours or days until I can leave. And it's kind of the same now. It's like, I'm just like, I don't know. I know I have work to do, but it's super hard to get anything done. And I'm just counting down except there is no precise date when I get out of this. So
you're in Portland.
Yeah,
okay, that's what I thought. Are you guys still stay at home?
I mean, I think it's not like strictly enforced, but people seem to be sticking to that. I don't know, I stay at home so much I can't tell if people are doing it. I know there are like certain hours of the day I can't take my dog for walks because like everybody is out, and I just don't want to deal with like how do I, how do I navigate these joggers who are on both sides of the road without like, I don't know. There's a lot of people math to do.
Oh,
So
there you have it. Well, can you tell us about what projects you have coming up?
yeah, we're working on the third and final volume of Crowded. So the first volume's out. The second one is coming out, I think the 24th of June now. We just got a new date. So, and that's, it's like sort of a futuristic book about an America where there's a Kickstarter for assassinations. And our main character gets a campaign opened on her, and it's already worth $1 million. So she has to hire a bodyguard from like an Uber for bodyguard apps or bodyguards app. And they go on the run, and hijinks ensue. It's like a buddy comedy sort of. So yeah, we just wrapped volume 2, and so we're putting volume 3 out just as a trade. So that'll be out. I think we're going to be all wrapped up on it by end of November or sometime in December. So it'll be out probably early next year, maybe. And then I'm working on a couple things that haven't been announced. I'm working on, like Heartthrob Volume 3 we just finished up, and that'll be coming out. I don't know when the new date is, but I think it'll be out before the end of the year, and that wraps up 15 issues of that book. And yeah, right now I'm just kind of working on new stuff, and all of it's sort of deeply under wraps. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to like keep pumping out cool stuff that like, that appeals to me. Like, it's just like I just want to keep writing for as long as I am able to fool people into paying me to write.
Yeah, well, there you go. Can you talk a little bit about your process, like how you write, where you get ideas, things like that?
Sure. I mean, as far as ideas go, like they're very, I don't know. Some just sort of coalesce for a while. Some just like you hear a news story. Like I'm working on a new thing where it's like I was reading a story about how hippos winding up in the South American jungle has sort of begun to make up for the effects of extinct species and sort of return things back to almost like the dinosaur era. And like that alone doesn't sound like it's the basis for a story, but there was like just that idea. Like I just kind of followed it to a place where I thought, well, that's a really like, I don't know, it's a cool angle to use on something. That's mostly where I start out, is like, that would be a cool idea. And I mean, as far as process goes, I have a notebook where basically when I get a new idea, I give myself one sheet of paper front and back, and I just write out like anything I can think about it and like how to make it into a story. And if there's enough content to fill both sides of that page, I think I might be onto something. And sometimes I'm just like halfway through the first side of the page and I'm like, no, this is good and I should chase this. And then I start a notebook of its own, and I just kind of drown myself in like thinking about like, what do I want to do in this book? What would be like fun to do, and like what makes sense. I do a lot of homework in there of trying to make sure that everything I do makes a kind of logical sense. Yeah, I just kind of like, it's just sort of like endlessly tinkering with it. It's like, that dude who's been saying he's rebuilding his car for the last 10 years. And it's like, he is, if from his point of view, he's done a lot of work on it. From the outside, it doesn't look like a lot, but yeah, it's just a lot of like tiny little things here and there, and then you get it into shape, and then you have to find a collaborator who actually thinks it's good too, which is then that's phase 2 of like the self-doubt and terror of comics. and then yeah, I mean, once I find somebody to collaborate with who's like super into it, and I can get along with them, like we just kind of start working on it, and hope for the best. I have places in mind where I want certain books to go, and others I have no idea even what they are, and I want to work someplace where they have like editors that I think are cool and will get it. So, yeah, and then just trying to then you have to project manage all these books, and make sure that, like, for the most part, like, unless you're working with editors. So it's, yeah, I just kind of do as much of it myself as I can. And yeah, it's super exhausting and frustrating sometimes, but like, it's my dream job and I get to do it. So it's all pretty worth it.
Mm-hmm. And what's the difference in process between like when you're creating your own stuff versus working for other people?
With other people, they're the ones who sort of give you the parameters. It's, it's like, as opposed to like, back in the olden days, when like the Land Rush was on, like the very first people who showed up and were like, I'm going to take all this. But like later stages, they had divided things up into parcels. So people who showed up were like, well, I will take this parcel. So when you're doing work for hire, it's very much like somebody has laid out the boundaries of your parcel and sort of, tells you what you can and cannot do and what they're shooting for. So it's like getting, I don't know, it's like getting like 9 out of 12 ingredients of the recipe and then trying to figure out what's missing and how to actually make it taste good. I'm using a lot of metaphors in this, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's work for hire is almost easier sometimes because like it takes a lot of the choices away from you. Like one of the problems with doing creator owned stuff is like, it's infinite choice. I could do whatever I want. I could, halfway through this like sci-fi book, I could like drag them into a fantasy world, like, and it might suck, but I can do it and no one will stop me. And with work for hire stuff, it's very much like, it's like, here are the tools that you can use. Like, don't drag everything out. I don't know. It's just more precise, and it's also easier because there's so much that's already been done for you, especially like with like superhero characters and stuff. Like so much of the heavy lifting of who that character is has already been done for you in the past 60, 70 years. So whereas if you're doing something original, you have to introduce a brand new person and then somehow make the reader care about them in sometimes as short as 22 pages. So yeah, work for hire is definitely easier, but I'd say creator owned is probably more fun.
Mm-hmm. Which of your projects like is your favorite, like your darling, the one that you are most kind of connected to, or do you have one?
Yeah, I don't really have a favorite. Like High Crimes is very precious to me because it's the very first book that I did. And like we did it like nobody, it was a digital first book. Like we didn't have a print run of it. Nobody cared. Nobody knew who we were nor cared. But we had the freedom to kind of do whatever we wanted to do. Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet Ibrahim Mustafa, who is an amazing artist, and was somehow lucky enough to trick him into, like, if so many things could have gone wrong with that book, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you because it never would have come out, and then I never would have gotten anybody to pay attention to me. Like that book was my way into comics. So with that, I did a book at Boom called Welcome Back that I'm really fond of. It's like a sort of a love story, but it's about a war via reincarnation. And like speaking about like where do you get your ideas, like that initially came from me reading a book about Scientology. So like, and never would I have in a million years thought like well, I'm gonna read this Scientology book and get a really cool like adventure story out of it. But that's how these things work sometimes. I don't know. Heartthrob is really precious to me. Like that's I don't know. That's the first time like I sold something like really big to a publisher where I was like, this is gonna be 15 issues. It's gonna be 3 story arcs. Like it's gonna take place in the 70s. There'll be a lot of Fleetwood Mac in it. I don't know. If it was the first time it felt like in movies where a director gets final cut, like which is like the ultimate power. It felt like that to me, of like a publisher was trusting me enough to be like, yeah, we're gonna approve the whole run right here, no matter what happens going forward, and we're gonna give you the chance to like tell this big long story you want to tell. Yeah, and then Shanghai Red and Crowded, those are my first books at Image, which was on my list for a very, very long time. And I just felt like I had to get good enough and at least like have enough people who knew who I was before I went to Image with books in hand. But yeah, no, and it's been amazing. So, but there's not a book I've written that I don't like. It's just they're all kind of like my journals in a way. Because I can go back and look at them and I can remember like what my life was like while I was working on this book, and see things that I pulled from my actual life and put in there. So yeah, it's like it's like asking someone to pick their favorite journal. It's like, well, this is a really good year and I like how this turned out, but like yeah, it's all been. I just feel tremendously lucky that I've been able to publish one book, much less as many as I have.
Was there a point that you knew you were going to be a storyteller, that you knew you wanted to write in comics?
I mean, since I was a kid, I wanted to write. Like, I have vivid memories of like being, I don't know, 5 or 6, and like writing my first short story, which was called I think it was called Star Cats or Space Cats. But yeah, I always wanted, and I got hooked on comics like in grade school, and then comics and I fell in and out of love several times, but I always kept coming back. But as far as like an actual job, like like I grew up like lower, I grew up the kid of a single mom. Like we never made a buttload of money. Like things were always perilous. So growing up, I was always like, I have to get a real job. I have to get it. Like, sure, I want to be a writer, but like the concept of that terrified me so much because I was raised to be like, every, it's paycheck to paycheck sometimes, like, and who knows what'll go wrong. And it just seemed like, I don't know. I never had the guts to like go after it, basically until the economy collapsed in 2008 and I was running out of money. I was like if I don't try it now, like I'm just gonna never have tried it, and then I will just hate myself even more. So yeah, I moved halfway across the country to Portland because I knew there were a couple of comics publishers here and a lot of comics people, and I was like, I'm gonna try to break into comics and see if that works, and it did. Which I'm not one of those people who's like, if you set your mind to it, you can achieve anything. It's always just like, if you're lucky and like 6 things work out in the process, you'll achieve it. But yeah, I've never been a power of positive thinking person. So when it actually started to work, I thought I was having like some sort of delusion or something, like oh, I'm gonna wake up and realize that this is all just like a weird dream that I had, and I'm actually refilling the fridge at the local like Quick Trip or whatever. Not that that's I'm not looking down, but like that's not my dream.
So when you were a kid, did you read comics, or was there like a comic that you read that made you think that this was where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I mean, I started reading comics, I don't know, maybe in like 4th or 5th grade. Like a kid I went to summer camp with, who was like now would be called the weird kid because he often came to camp dressed in like safari clothes. And like he was just weird. He's just one of those off kids, and just like he never saw what was wrong with like wearing an actual pith helmet to summer camp, like with full like Dr. Livingstone gear. But whenever we would take the bus places, he would have a backpack full of comics, and I started asking to read some of them, and then it's like, man, these are really good. And then when I went back to school, like maybe 5th grade, I found out that there was a comic book store literally like a block from my grade school. So before then, as a latchkey kid, like I had an allowance, and I would always like go blow my allowance at arcades. And then I immediately took my allowance money and started buying comics with it. And just like, yeah, just as I just became like a fiend, like I found all the comic book stores in Chicago, and the ones that I could like easily reach by public transportation, like, and I would just go and scour and just like, how many comics can I get for as little money as possible? And I don't know which one, you know, I have a very vivid memory of being at this party. Like my mom went to some party with her friends and brought me with because she couldn't afford a babysitter, and like, so they were all getting drunk. And one of her friends, he was this like, he had gotten a degree, I think, in paleontology, but instead he was working as a security guard. But he knew everything about the X-Men. And I asked him at that party, I was like, will you tell me about the X-Men? And he literally was like walking me through, you know, from like that first issue, like, I can't remember where it stopped. I definitely remember him describing the Brood to me. So like he got pretty far into it, like, and it was just I remember that moment very vividly because there was like something in my head clicking of like, that's so cool that like you can have like all these shared worlds and they just like keep perpetuating and go. So. And I was lucky enough to be reading comics at a time where like they were introducing new books that I could get into, because like that was always the hardest part, or that was the hardest part for me when I started comics, was like X-Men's already at like issue 300 or something. It's like I cannot afford like, and like trades weren't as big back then, so it was like I remember like the trade I had, the first trade I ever bought was the Dark Phoenix saga, and it was like. I was like, okay, well, I wish I could find out what happens after this, but I'd have to go track down the next, 40 single issues. So yeah, it was just everything about comics that like, I don't know. I just love worlds within worlds. I like subcultures, and I like, sort of, these little industries where they have their own sort of language and stuff. And comics is very much like a language unto itself, like no other medium does anything like it. And it just, I was just hooked. And then, I would quit because of like worried about, I quit like when I went into high school because I was like, I don't want to be a nerd who reads comic books. Like this is before nerds were cool. So, and then I got back into them in college, and then got out of them and then back, and like, it was just a yo-yo, but I could never quit comics. Like every time I tried, it just like, no matter what I tried to fill that hole with, I'd still just be like, I really want to read some comics. So yeah, I was stuck at an early age and I can't get away. So.
Is there a X-Men story arc that's your favorite?
I mean, I would say Dark Phoenix, just because it's the first big chunk of X-Men I ever read, and it was just so like, I don't know, there's just like so much that, like my comics reading before that was pretty light, so like it was just like so like, and like weird stuff for a kid, like all of Chris Claremont's weird bondage stuff with the Hellfire Club, and it's like my young brain is trying to figure out what that is, but like there's also like, there's the doomed love story. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like if there's another. I mean, I eventually wound up reading most of the X-Men, and I couldn't tell you a lot about most of it. I think anything with arcade in it too, I liked. I was always a fan of mazes as a kid for whatever. Like, I love mazes with traps in them. So arcade was my dude.
What about if you could, like, is there any one character or one story arc that someone could like pitch you, or that you're dying to do, any character you're dying to write?
I have had this Wolverine short story, and I'll never be able to do it, but it's basically Wolverine wakes up on a deserted island, and is trapped there, and basically has to cannibalize himself. But because of his healing factor, he keeps regrowing. So it's just like, 60, 90 days, and it's just like Wolverine just like trying to figure out, okay, what part am I going to cut off and regrow today? Like, so that's my dream X-Men story.
I'm never going sailing with you.
I'm never going sailing, so
Well, there you have it.
but yeah, other than that, there's a villain in the Marvel universe called Madcap, who is sort of like their proto Deadpool. And yeah, I always loved that character, and I was super mad when they brought it. Not mad, but I was just like, I don't know. Sometimes as a comics writer, you think like, I want to like bring back this character that nobody remembers, and I want to make him cool again. And somebody got to it before I did, so I was kind of annoyed. But I'm also happy that like Madcap has been recognized as a I don't know, probably to my mind the coolest villain in the Marvel universe.
So I know you have some stuff that you got to get to tonight, so I'll finish up with my final question. What would you tell someone who wants to go down this career path? What advice would you give them?
Like everybody says, like, if you want to make comics, go make a comic. Like, and I agree with that, but I think for different reasons. I think you need to do it to see if you're the kind of person who can work with a group of people that you've never met before, and whose lives, don't center around this thing. I feel like you really have to like make a book to see like what are the frustrations and what are the like hair pulling moments of comics. And the very first book I ever did was this book I co-wrote with somebody called Screamland. It was the second volume of this book called Screamland, and it was out through Image, so like we were in charge of everything. So I took a lot on myself. So like I lettered the whole book. I did color separations on the whole book. Like tried to make sure everybody was on schedule. So much stuff went wrong, and like our book got canceled after 5 issues, and I lost a friendship over it, and it's just like a nightmare. Like if I described all the events that happened around that book, just the bad stuff, people would be like, "Why would you ever do that?" And it's like, well, because like when I was done with it, I was holding a copy of my book in my hands, and I was like, I want to make another one. Like, so I feel like you really do have to go out and make one and see, like, it's because it's not all, no dream job is an actual dream. Like, there are moments in it where you're like, this is an actual dream. Like, but a lot of it is just like it. It's called a job for a reason, because a lot of it sucks. So yeah, I would say like first and foremost is like make sure that this is actually something you want to do, and that you're the kind of person who can collaborate with other people without micromanaging them or getting, losing your cool when somebody like ghosts on you or like doesn't answer your emails or just like walks away from a project. Like there's so many things that I think just don't get talked about. I mean, on the positive side, I think like, if you love comics, and for me, it was also a thing of like, I always wanted to write, and I have a couple novels that no one will ever see, that are like half finished. And I mean, that was the problem. The thing I love about comics is like, all you have to do is write 20 pages, like for a standard comic, like write 22 pages. Like if you have this huge story you want to do, you can break it up into these smaller pieces, and you're not, for me, like my problem was always just like, how do I finish this? Like, because nobody's waiting on it, and nobody cares. So like, I could write this forever and tinker with it and make it some sort of impossible level of perfection that doesn't exist. But with comics, it's like, no, like, like, okay, cool, you got us this issue, you better start working on the next one, because as soon as we're done with this, we have to move on to, like, and you can't be precious about stuff. Like, you can just, like, you just have to do the best you can, and sometimes, stuff comes out and you're not 100% happy with it, but, it drives you to do better next time. And it takes away that whole, like, oh, well, I can't do anything with it because I still have 400 more pages to write. And it's like, no, all you got to do is write the first 22 pages. And, like, if there's enough there, like, then write the next 22 pages. Like, it's, I don't know. There's definitely, one of the things I love about comics is, like, you get that sort of immediate gratification. Not just, like, of like binging a book that you love, but like as a writer or a creator, writing something and then it's out for people to buy 6 weeks later. That's crazy. Like that's like TV, movies out, like nowhere else does that happen. But like comics is so quick that, like, yeah, that's one of the things I love the most is, like, you can immediately see whether people love it or hate it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the dream I had of what comics does not match the reality, but also, like, there are amazing things that have happened to me since I started working in comics that, like, never even occurred in my wildest dreams when I was hustling to try and break in. So yeah, and just, like, in the end, you have to love comics to write or create comics, because, like, nobody's gonna, very few people are gonna get rich. Very few people are gonna, turn it into something else. And so, like, first and foremost is, like, you gotta love comics in order to make them. Otherwise, people will know that you're just trying to, like, get a screenplay through, like, in some different form. So yeah, I guess that's my advice.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else you want to say before we let you go?
No, I'm trying to, thank you to anybody who's watching this. And people who are still out there supporting their local shops. And then just on a personal level, I wanted to see if I could hit you up about you guys are doing mail order. Okay. I'll hit you up separately about that then.
Okay. Well, thank you for being a part of our Free Comic Book Day. And
yeah, thank you.
Yay, Free Comic Day.
Yay.
And have a good evening.